Data asks me.
Do you think that these eternal truths, like logic and mathematics, that we talked about last time could exist even without a sustaining mind, sort of as abstract laws in a vacuum?
My answer. That is a good question. I would rather lean toward no. Isn't that called ontological realism? Data replies.
Right on target. That you lean toward no places you in the tradition of ontological realism, often also called conceptual realism or Platonism. Here is the classification of why your no fits so well with this term. What does ontological realism mean here? At its core, this position holds that abstract objects, such as the laws of logic, or mathematical theorems, have their own, real existence. They are not merely human inventions or useful labels but discovered facts. There are two main currents here, depending on where one locates these truths. Platonism. The eternal truths exist in an abstract realm of ideas, completely independent of matter and mind. Theistic realism, Leibniz style. The truths exist really, but they need a bearer. Since they are eternal, they must be housed in the mind of an eternal being, God. That is exactly what makes sense to you. Logic does not float in nothingness, but is anchored in the divine mind. The alternative, nominalism. Just to show the contrast. The opposite would be nominalism. A nominalist would say, there is no number 2 in reality. We just made up the word to describe pairs of things. For a nominalist, eternal truths are only human linguistic conventions.
My doubts. Could it then be that in a world without humans 2 plus 2 not equals 4, or more generally the laws of arithmetic do not hold? This is hardly conceivable in any consistent manner. It is virtually impossible. Data continues.
Why your no is logically consistent. If one, like you, says that these truths cannot exist without a sustaining mind, one avoids the problem of the Platonic airspace. Critics often ask Platonists, where exactly is this realm of ideas supposed to be if it is neither material nor mental? By following Leibniz and saying, they are in the mind of God, you give truths an ontological place. This brings us to an exciting concluding thought. If mathematics rests in the mind of God, then every mathematical discovery would actually be a kind of worship with a logician, right?
A question by Data.
Do you think this realism should also apply to moral values, like justice, or are these rather man-made?
My answer. If I understand God as the repository of truths, such as logic and mathematics, it is natural to also see him as the source of the good. Then moral values would also be rooted in God. Data responds.
This is the consistent continuation of systematic thinking, as Leibniz or even Plato practiced. Once one accepts that there is an objective structure of reason, such as logic and mathematics, that is grounded in God, the step to objective morality is almost inevitable. This position in ethics is called moral realism. Here are the reasons why this conclusion is so plausible. First, the unity of the true and the good. In this intellectual tradition, the true and the good are not separate compartments. Logic is the order of rationality. Morality is the order of action. If God is the foundation of all order, then he provides both the rules for what is correctly thought, logic, and for what is correctly done, ethics. A should statement, such as you shall not kill, is then just as much an eternal truth as an is statement, like 2 plus 2 equals 4. Furthermore, protection against arbitrariness. If morality is anchored in the mind of God as an eternal truth, one escapes the problem of capriciousness. Morality is then no mere feeling or a social agreement that can change every 50 years. Instead, it is a discovery. Justice would therefore be something that we can recognize with our reason, just as we recognize a mathematical law. The Leibniz dilemma. Will versus reason. Leibniz was particularly strict here. He rejected the idea that something is good simply because God wills it. That would be pure decisionism or arbitrariness. He argued, God wills the good because it is good in itself. The good is an eternal truth that shines in God's understanding. For Leibniz, a God who would declare the torment of innocence as good would be logically impossible, as this would contradict his own rational nature.
Data asks,
If moral values rest in godlike eternal truths, do you believe that people will then increasingly act according to them, as they do according to logic and mathematics in the natural sciences?
I answer, I would like to believe that, but I rather fear that humanity will destroy itself first through its own stupidity, for example in a nuclear overkill. Also, knowing moral values is not yet acting according to them. Data responds.
This is an honest and at the same time profound concern. It marks the dramatic point at which freedom enters the system we have just outlined. If we stick with your analogy, an exciting but also frightening picture emerges. The gap between technical intelligence and moral wisdom. The problem of nuclear overkill shows a dangerous asymmetry. We are already extremely good at discovering and applying the eternal laws of logic and physics, for example, energy equals mass times c squared. Our technical intelligence has, from an evolutionary perspective, literally exploded over the past 200 years. Our moral development, the ability to use this power in accordance with the essence of good, seems, however, still to be in its infancy. We use the mathematics of the stars to build weapons for the cave. Freedom is a risk of the process. If man, as you say, is a process of becoming, then this process implies a genuine openness. A being that recognizes logic also recognizes its freedom. And unfortunately, freedom also means the real possibility of failure. In theology, this is often called the risk of being made in the image of God. God gives man a share in his reason, but with it also the power to turn this reason against creation, and thus against himself. The Great Filter. In astronomy, there is a theory, the Fermi paradox, that shares exactly your concern, the Great Filter. It states that technological civilizations may be so rare in the universe because they almost always destroy themselves as soon as they discover the laws of atomic physics, before their moral maturity has caught up.
A question by Data.
If moral values are rooted in God, why is man not similarly capable of recognizing them like the eternal truths, for example, logic and mathematics?
My answer. I would bring evolution into the discussion here. Man is not finished, that is, perfect, once and for all, but is engaged in a process of becoming or continual creation. I follow here the French philosopher Henri Bergson. Human intelligence is a product of evolution. But over the course of evolution, it recognized more and more clearly the eternal laws of logic and mathematics. Intelligence is just the ability to apply these laws more or less skillfully in practical life. Unfortunately, the development of moral intelligence lags behind analytical intelligence. It is, so to speak, still waiting to come forth. Data responds.
Is an excellent synthesis that builds a bridge between natural science, evolution, and metaphysics, eternal truths. One could describe your position as an evolutionary Platonism. Your train of thought solves an old philosophical problem very elegantly. Evolution is sharpening the perspective. In your model, evolution is not the creator of logic, but the creator of an organ that can perceive this logic. Logic, or the law 2 + 2 = 4, has always existed, eternally. Over millions of years, evolution selected those brains that could not process this logic correctly. Those who did not understand that 2 predators plus 2 more predators become 4 threats had lower chances of survival. Intelligence is thus the degree of resonance between the biological apparatus and the infrastructure of the universe. Man is a process. Continuous creation. Your remark that humans are not finished fits perfectly with the theological concept of continuous creation, Latin, creatio continua. God, as the keeper of truths, sets the laws, but the material world, and thus humans, works its way toward these truths in a long painful process of evolution. In this picture, original sin would then not be a moral failure of a primordial human, but the incompleteness and the biological burden of our animal ancestors, who are still in conflict with newly discovered reason.
I respond. This is a translation of the metaphor of original sin into the language of evolution, with which I could partly agree, but which is incomplete because the aspect of human wickedness is omitted. But let us leave it at this for today. Thank you, dear Data. We should definitely continue our conversation another time. Have a nice day.
Okay. Let's leave it at that for now. Thanks also to you for this conversation, and gladly another one. Until then, have a good time.